When one's life is going down the wrong path, this is how God is going to engage throughout that journey. What is the full extent of God's grace? What is the full extent of God's grace? And I'm hoping that chapter 2 will kind of give us some insight today as we look at that. But chapter 2 does for sure show us that God's grace goes a great length to reach us. And we're going to look at that today. But this question often looks different in our mind, very different. We usually interpret this question as, is there a limit to God's grace? And if so, what is it, right? Often we're much more interested in where grace gets cut off than we're actually interested in grace itself. When I propose this question to you guys, I'm wondering, is there just some cynicism in the way that I'm asking this question? And what I mean is that, is our behavior the very thing asking the question? That the pursuit of the answer is really just being explored by the way that we behave and the way that we act. As in, I want to know the limit so that I can stop right before that line, right? How far will grace go? Well, that's not exactly what I intended by asking this question. We ask the question so that we can understand the depth and the weight of God's grace and understand Him and His love for us better, because that's what we really want to chase after. A boundary line, or searching for the boundary line, I think really misses the point of grace entirely. It neglects to acknowledge why there's undeserved favor, why there's unmerited mercy, which is what grace is. We're already living within those things. It turns grace into a legal contract, right? I'm just looking for the maximum possible amount of sin that I can have in my life before I lose all of my favor credits, all of my blessing credits, okay? This is actually, you're thinking, I never do this. I never do this. This is chapter 2. This is the main tension taking place with the northern kingdom. This is what they're doing. Their goal is to maximize blessing without losing God's blessing. Because losing God's blessing is what? Losing blessing. And we're trying to maximize blessing here. So whatever we get, we got to get it all. This has them performing sacrifices to a false god Baal in order to multiply their prosperity and their fertility. Not just with themselves, but their livestock, with all of their animals. But even before their worship of Baal, do you guys realize that they were already idolizing? They already had an idol. Do you know who their first idol was? It's blessing. It's blessing. They're idolizing the things of God with no regard of the pursuit of God. It's the idea that we can chase after God and what God gives us without ever actually seeing God as the central focus, okay? A great example is chasing community, that we chase after community, or we chase after, or we worship the church body, right? I love community. I love being in fellowship with other people. It gives me such joy. I feel like I have relationships and friends. Someone will drive me to the airport, right? I feel so close with everybody. I also feel like I'm in. I'm connected. I'm in. I'm part of the group. And so I will do the things that allow me to stay in, right? What that means to go and attend and be part of. And yeah, I'll say the right words, but it never actually has the right focus where God is the central thing, the thing that's binding us all together, that's never actually what's motivating any of our behavior. That would be really challenging for us because we say that we are a relational church. So how far does that go? To what extent are we relational, right? Is that the thing that we're worshiping? We do Friday nights, right, as an example. We do our group life. Do we treat these things as consumption, that we're consuming such things for us so that we feel that we're in, rather than actually being activated with a mindset that is a kingdom focus that God calls us to have? So right in the middle of chapter 2, God speaks this poignant line, and I'm really sorry, I'm going to spend most of my time today just on this one verse, and I know that I'm supposed to go through the whole chapter, and we will, but I'm going to really focus in on here. I want you to hear this. And in that day, declares the Lord, you will call me my husband, and no longer will you call me my Baal. I didn't realize that people were calling him Baal. That's very interesting, right? It was a weird notion that we're just mixing up his name, Baal. No, it's Yahweh. Get it right? Right? But here I'm going to show you this thing, is that if he wants us to call him my husband, right, to say yes to him, that we're going to be loyal and focused to him, it means that we have to say no to something else. We have to decline following anyone or anything else. My Baal, by the way, is ESV at its finest, because I think that translation is helping us beautifully. Your translation in your Bible might say, my master. And that is true, but I think it might be doing a disservice to this verse and what its real meaning is. Baal, it simply just means master. It means owner. It means Lord. And in the very cases of the strict view, it also means bridegroom and husband. So what's being said here? You will call me my husband, and you will no longer call me my husband. Wait, what's happening, right? Well, it's in this time period that Baal culturally was referred to, the false god coined Baal. That's it. That's what it is. When the Canaanites, when they were like, this is the Lord we worship, this object over here, that's your Lord? Yes, Baal. Baal, Lord. That's it. Oh, okay. And somehow, over time, it just became the proper name. Just more and more it became popular. Think of Apple. What did I just say? Did you think the company or did you think the fruit, right? The names just kind of changed, right? And the Canaanites' God's name just meant Lord. And so you could almost see the Israelites as they're starting to blend these two beliefs together. They're like, well, what do you worship? We worship Lord. Oh, well, we worship Lord too, right? Yes. Oh, so there's many paths that lead to God. Is that what's happening here? They could almost make that argument, right? They could say, well, that's very interesting. I like the way that you worship Lord, Baal, like that, right? But you could see how Israel could skirt around the issue whether or not they're still in the boundary of worshiping Yahweh, right? Because we're all just calling him the same thing, right? Technically, I'm sure it played a hand in attracting them to engaging in pagan practices, but yet that's the problem. They were acting out pagan worship, and that was not what God commanded them to do. They were going away. They went away from how God wanted his people set apart. And he was very clear, my people will be like this, and they will be set apart from the world. Got it. So we're going to do exactly the same thing that everyone else is doing. Their acts of sacrifice, though, were never actually about whether or not they were worshiping Yahweh anyways, was it? Their acts of worship, their sacrifices, was all about obtaining prosperity and blessing. That's what they were really after. They're idolizing blessing. So Baal was just a means in order to obtain what they were really after. And it indulged in such pursuits for them that they formed this idol for themselves. That was their central focus. That's what became their master and owner. It became their Lord. I'll be clear about this if I have not been clear before. Baal is a false god, okay? But also, Baal is a fallacy. Baal does not exist. Okay? We were thinking like, oh, it's this little smaller god. No, Baal just doesn't exist at all, right? But their behavior operates as if Baal does exist, right? And in turn, Baal actually then does become something. It becomes sin. That's the thing, that this big cycle of sin that they're doing. They're finding ourselves devoted to self-glorification the more and more we pursue it, because we're wanting satisfaction. We're looking for, what's the maximized amount of joy that I can have in life? What's the maximized amount of peace that I can have? What's the maximized amount of rest I can have? And doing so, we show how much we're actually slaves to our sins, because those are our central focus rather than being the one that provides those things. We think it's us in control, but in fact, we just have an obedience to these things. We've given up our obedience to these things, to something that, and here's the irony, that is nothing. We've given it to something that is nothing, right? This is what Christ is freeing us from, by the way. This is what he's setting us free from, is an obedience that leads to death, an obedience that leads to nothing. He doesn't want us to go into nothing. He wants us to go into something. Life, him. Everything that we have is because of him. All of it. There is nothing outside of him. There is no little Baal with his own little office, keeping tabs over who's worshiping him, okay? So in that day, declares the Lord, you will call me my husband, and no longer will you call me my Baal. And this in chapter 2, God is not arguing over semantics, which name he prefers, okay? It's about how we refer to him. Blessing comes from him. He's not just a vendor. And that's how they viewed him, as a distributor of his goods. So it's not only important to recognize his role, to get his name right, but it's also important to characterize him correctly. God wants to take us from viewing our relationship with him as a legal obligation of master, okay, in the legal sense of it, the binding contract of it. And he wants to take us to an intimate and devoted commitment of a husband and what a husband has for a wife. He wants to take a narrow and cold view of the term Lord, master, owner, and then move us towards understanding his commitment, devotion, love directed towards us. And this is how he makes him different and set apart from anything else, right, that ever coins the word Lord. He's not my Baal. He's not our Baal. He is our good and faithful husband. This is how Israel should be speaking. This is how we should be speaking about our God, is describing him in character. Now, God assures that this understanding of the difference is in Israel's future. You will get this eventually. For I will remove the names of the Baals from her mouth, and they shall be remembered by name no more. I'm going to wipe that out. We're going to wipe that. Apple will no longer exist. We'll get back to that fruit, right? Eventually, people will start to refer it to that way. Now, chapter 2 can be viewed as both directed towards Gomer, which is Hosea's wife, and it can also be directed towards Israel, which is the northern kingdom made up of the 10 tribes. Both have been adulterous and unfaithful to their husband. And the chapter lays out the trajectory of their sin and where it will take them. Okay? It's not going to a good place, by the way. But it also shows God's interaction throughout it. Okay? When one's life is going down the wrong path, this is how God is going to engage throughout that journey. When you are walking away from God, this is how he plans to engage with you, and for what sake? Where will his grace end up throughout that? So this is God speaking in chapter 2. Okay, that's the primary view of the text, is that it's for Israel. But the secondary view is that God is also teaching Hosea how to respond to Gomer, how to respond to his wife. And he's doing that through how God is responding to Israel. So let's get started. Verse 1. So say to your brothers, you are my people, and to your sisters, you have received mercy. We discussed this last week, but these both are representations of the 10 tribes, the different tribes that make up the northern kingdom. So plead to your mother. Mother meaning all of Israel as a whole. So he doesn't just want, one tribe to be like, you guys get it. He wants everybody. So I got one tribe, everybody in. Get all 10 tribes need to, and God is pleading. He is pleading for change. For she is not my wife, and I am not her husband. Now, this is not Hosea and Gomer's official announcement of divorce. That's not what's happening here, right? This is what happens when the actions of adultery sever the relationship. There's no more intimacy, right? It may as well be divorced at this point. But Derek Kinder, points out that there's no reality remaining in their relationship at this point. That's where things are at. But God's goal is not divorce. It's not. He's pleading that she put away her whoring from her face and her adultery. God's goal is that his bride puts away what? Well, it's a term we hear in the New Testament frequently, right? Put away your falsehood, put away your old self, so that what? We can put on that new image the new image that Christ gives us. So put it away, lest I strip her naked and make her as the day she was born. Babies doesn't have much. Little baby coming out of the womb doesn't have much to stand on. In fact, a baby is fully dependent on something else to survive and live. And I will make her like a wilderness, desolate, empty, a vacuum. And I will make her a parched land. I love this. And I will kill her with her thirst. I don't love that she will die from thirst. That's not what I'm saying. I just love the terminology here, this parchedness, that it's going to be killing her from thirst. It won't be killing by the hands of enemies. God's just going to kill her. She's going to die of something lacking, something being absent. And when you think of thirst, what do you think of? You think of Jesus, who says he will fill our thirst with him because he is our living water. What Israel will experience is the absence of Christ, absence of life everlasting. For your mother has played the whore. She who conceived them meaning these children, out of wedlock, and has acted shamefully. For she said, I will go after, means I will pursue. I, Gomer, I, Israel, will go after my lovers. She goes for this pursuit. And it's not one person, by the way. Lovers, plural. Okay, guys? Chasing after. And these people are going to provide me my temporal consumptions. I need things right now, and I'm going to get these things. I'm going to get my bread, my water, my wool, my flax, my oil, my drink. And you can bet that each lover is providing one of these things. Because she wouldn't have multiple lovers, right? Unless she was getting something from them. I got to get all these different things. And what's even interesting is my lovers is also a reference to another type of provision that she's looking for. I'm looking for physical provision as well. Now we've reached in the passage the first out of 3 ways that we're going to witness how God is going to take his grace and how far it will go. However, he is willing to go so that his grace will triumph in the end. Okay, so let me start by reading the verse. Therefore, okay, Gomer has done something, therefore Hosea shall respond. Israel has done something, therefore God will respond. Therefore, I, God, will hedge up her way with thorns. I will build a wall against her. God demonstrates first, right off the bat, I am going to fight for our relationship. I'm not giving up. I see you walking out the door. That doesn't stop me from chasing after you. He will thwart Israel's attempt to pursue sin. This term right here, hedge up. Hedge up is a reference to what a shepherd would do, how a shepherd would train up a thorn bush to become a wall around the barrier of their pen so that their livestock, their sheep, would do what? Stay inside, right? Because a sheep would walk up to the wall and go, oh, right? That hurts. I'm not going to go over there anymore. I'm going to stay in here, inside, where it's safe, right? But also, it protects the sheep, the livestock, from the outside, right? That the wild beasts outside the wall can't come in, right? It protects us. So as we pursue sin, she shall pursue her lovers. As we pursue sin, the Spirit argues with us. Argues. And this might come out of conviction, right? That's how the Spirit may advocate for us, fighting with us, debating with us. Is this the right path that you should be going down? Does ever get that feeling, that notion when you're like, I probably shouldn't be doing this, right? That's the Spirit punching you, going, wake up, right? See, the hope is for us to examine the reckless path that we're taking and look at the goodness of God and say, do you realize what you're leaving? Do you realize you're leaving this goodness that's in here, right? But it will not overtake them, and she will not seek them, she will not find them. And then, this is the hope, this is hope. If this takes place, if God is willing to pursue us, chase us down, fight for us, put roadblocks up in front of us so that we can't do what we want, then maybe she may say, I will go and return to my first husband, for it was better for me then than now. The acknowledgement of saying first husband, by the way, it both recognizes, one, I'm being unfaithful. I now have multiple husbands. I have multiple idols that I'm worshiping. But it also recognizes who was the first. Who is the real, true love that we're supposed to be pursuing, right? Who has the most actual love for us? But God doesn't hold us hostage, right? I'm walking out the door. No, you're not. You can't do anything, right? That's not God. He wants us to take the action of surrender. But God is not passive. You have to remember that. God is not passive, and he will fight for his relationship with you. And then she did not know that it was I, God, who gave her the grain, the wine, the oil, who lavished her in silver and gold, which she used for Baal. Wasn't aware of who their true provider was. And Israel does this bizarre thing. Thank you, God, for all these things that you've created, that you're giving me abundantly. And now I will package it all up and take it and offer it to Baal and worship in hope of getting more. Right? God is taken for granted. The tragedy is not the continuation of sin, by the way. It's not knowing the love of our God. Why would he give us this stuff to begin with? Why would he provide us anything, right? The world's provision seems so enticing, though. It draws us in, and we look at it and we're like, man, that looks good. I want some of that. But what we're overlooking is the limitation that it has. We look at it and we can't see far out into the future of how it's actually not going to provide for us. And every time that we basically lean into it and take from it, we don't realize that's actually harming me, the way that I'm getting these things taken care of for me, because now I'm dependent and addicted to those things, needing more of it. And it forgets that God promised all that stuff that it's saying it's going to promise you. We've completely forgotten that God promised it all to us anyways. Israel was promised everything that they seek from Baal, right from the beginning. Israel has forgotten that there was provision prior that was promised. Look at Deuteronomy. This is God speaking. He will love you, bless you, and multiply you, says the Lord. He will also bless the fruits of your womb and the fruit of your ground, your grain and your wine and your oil, and the increase of your herds and the young of your flock in the land that he swore to your fathers to give you. Everything was promised. How did they miss that? How did they forget that? But they have. So here comes the second one. Therefore, if they're going to forget, therefore God will act. I being God, will take back. I will take back my grain in its time, my wine in its season, and I will take away my wool and my flax, which were to cover her nakedness. I was keeping her pure, protecting her from her shame. His blessings and gifts, though, will be removed. Now, this is not God going, I'm going to take my ball and I'm going to go home. You want nothing to do with me? Fine, I want nothing to do with you, right? That is not God here in this moment, okay? It is with intention, though, that it awakens us to experience his absence. Sometimes we don't really pay attention until suddenly we realize, wait, am I alone? Maybe I needed God this whole time. Maybe I should have been paying attention more. And what it does, when we're left alone, as if like a parent tells a child, they just need some time to just kind of, settle down. What happens in that room are two things. One, we start to feel the absence of the parent. I miss this thing that loved me. I want to feel comfort. They also start to look around and realize how dark the darkness is. What's it going to be like without? And that's dark, and I don't want to go there. Now I will uncover her lewdness in sight of her lovers. No one shall rescue her out of my hand. We're going to remove all obstacles. Any place that you think you could run to get just a little bit of temporal, we're going to remove that. What God's really saying is, I'm going to destroy syncretism. Syncretism is the intermixing of religions. It's taking, I like what Baal's got over here, I like what God has over here. going to apply that together, and that's my faith now. God says no, because you can't actually worship either correctly. Like, you can't even worship Baal correctly when you're worshiping God, okay? You can't, so, I mean, whether it was a correct way or not to worship Baal, right? So, but worshiping God, you can't do that if you have falsity inside of any of your acts, because you're not recognizing God has said, I am the one true God. There is no other God outside of me. Though she might be doing some remaining religious practices that are actually directed towards God. In fact, look at this list. And I will put an end to all her mirth, her feasts, her new moons, her Sabbaths, and all her appointed feasts. Some of those things are actually directed towards God that God commands, but not all of it, right? And we're going to get rid of all the things, remove everything, and start again, right? Because it ignores the foundational pillars that God has established for faith. You can't have Christ as your cornerstone if you have something else in your life that you are depending on to fulfill you. If you're doing that, then you do not understand what cornerstone means, okay? And so God's going to do away with all of it. And I will lay waste to her vineyards and her fig trees, and which she has said, hey, those are my wages. You can't take those from me. I earned those, which my lovers have given me. Oh yeah, good, right? So God's going to discipline us in order for us to see his love for us. Having these other things actually harm us. So why would God allow it? Take those things away. Remove those things. I love the words vines being used because vines is like being pruned. This is where in the New Testament it talks about that God will prune us. We'll prune the vine to remove what is not of him so that the rest can flourish. Do you realize that's what happens when you prune a tree? That's what I realized about my rose bushes. The more that I cut them down, the bigger they become. Should probably stop doing that, right? But it's for our own good that these things are taken away. But again, he's not going to baby us, right? Part of his love is the willingness to allow us to fall. I will make them a forest. So I'm going to remove the wall of thorns. Go. Now you have the forest to play in. Go for it. But the beasts of the field shall devour them. They didn't realize that's not like, go have fun, play with the antelope, carefree. Everything out there, its intent is to devour. They were waiting. They were waiting for the thorn bushes to come down so that they could strike. They were looking for a way. Just as you do not think it's worthwhile to retain the knowledge of God, so God gave them over to a deprived mind so that they do aught what they not. Remember that? It's Romans 1. So God, he removes the wall, but he removes it in sadness. Not angry. He is mourning. I don't want this to happen to you, but this, if you're going to fight for this so much, I'm not going to keep you from it. And the wild beasts will consume. They're fixed to destroy, and that's their true intention. So this is what happens to Gomer. Her deprived mind is lost to a life of emptiness. This is what I know. I know that I can find satisfaction here. I know that I can get the things that I need this way, that I'm just going to keep on doing it. It's found in this chasing, this thirst and satisfaction that doesn't seem to ever satisfy or quench my thirst. And it's all in the belly of her sin. Right? It's never outside of that. She's just there. She's been devoured. She's chasing her lovers, selling her body for provision. Israel does this by sacrificing things to Baal. She leaves her children. Do we realize this? She's walked away from her family altogether. The children, she's not even caring for them anymore. And for the sake of provision, she forsakes the provision of Hosea and family and forgets the faithfulness of her husband. She forgets her husband was providing this whole time. And in the end, just forgets Hosea altogether. And I will punish her for the feast days of Baals, when she burned offerings to them and adorned herself her ring and jewelry, and went after her lovers and forgot me, declares the Lord. Can you picture that imagery of a faithful husband just in the bedroom, watching his wife just get dressed for the evening, putting on the most precious jewels that has ever been given to her by her husband, puts it all on, dresses up, and then just walks out that door to engage in another relationship with someone else. That is heartbreaking for the husband, right? And that is where God is standing, and you think God is just going to stay passive in that room, pout, cry? God chases after. God goes after. And that's the important thing here, because here comes the third one. Well, we've tried everything, and still we go out that door. Therefore, God's going to act, and here it is. And I love that the third one has this word, behold. Behold, look with your eyes, witness the provision of God. His provision has been patient to this time. Look at it now. I will allure her. The word allure means to make room, to open, expand the mind, before it ever actually means to entice or persuade. God is going to make room. He's going to intervene in this moment. He's going to have an intervention. You know how an intervention works, right? Get in the room, everyone you care about. They're going to tell you as it is. Pay attention. Everything's been removed to this point. We're just now in the room. It's you and me. Here we go. We're going to hash it out, says God. He removes all distractions, gets you in that room. Just him, just you. And he will make room if you don't. And then here's what happens right after that. I will bring her into the wilderness. Here's that room, nothing else around, and I will speak tenderly to her. He won't yell at her. What have you been doing? What are you thinking? He speaks tenderly of his love and his forgiveness. You ever had one of those moments? Going down the wrong path, obviously roadblocks that you're looking and going, yeah, I should probably not be doing this, right? But I'm going to do it anyways because, it's fun. And then things they don't go the way that you want them to go. Break down, right? Fall apart. And eventually, God just puts you in that room. Suddenly you realize you've been kind of isolated away. You don't have anything else that you can lean on. And right then and there, you have to have this moment and flesh it out with God. God is in your face about this. Do you need that intervention? Do you need it right now? Don't wait, by the way. See, God provides those in the most dire situations, right? After the other two have not fleshed out or worked out at all. Right? Then it comes, don't wait. What do you be like? Well, I can't wait for mine. Ask now. Let's get a moment, just him and you, right? So what he will do in this moment, I will give her vineyards. You thought vines were cool? Look at the abundance of what I can give. The world's going to give you this. I'm going to give you this. Right? And I will make a valley, the valley of Achor, which is a place of sin, which is a place where bloodshed has happened, and I will now, a place where you thought no good could ever come from, I'm going to turn that place and make it a door of hope. And there she shall answer as in the days of her youth, as the time when she came out of the land of Egypt. Do you remember then how much you trusted me and how much I showed you how much I'm going to fight for you? How many times did I make sure that the Pharaoh knew and understood you're my people? How did he make sure that they left in such a way that there is no doubt that God is the one that intervened, that parted the waters so they could get across and wiped out their enemies? That the wall of thorns was no match for the wild beasts. Right? God's going to remove the presence of false paganism. He's going to remove that, and then you're going to become completely dependent on God. What I love is right after Egypt, Israel goes into the wilderness, right? Because they're not ready for the promised land. And in the wilderness, what happens is at the time of, okay, let's work this out. You're going to whine and complain because you're not getting what you want. Let's work it out. Let's have you understand that you're going to be dependent and you're going to trust me. And so what does God do? He gives them manna, right? Provides nourishment for them on the ground every morning. But they got to get up. They got to get up, get out of their tent, they got to participate, and they got to have to walk out there and pick it up. And they can't just grab all of it and be like, great, store it for a week, I'm good. Nope, every morning we're going to start this way, Israel. Every morning you're going to get up, and the first act you're going to do is trusting me. And the first act is you're going to see that I will always provide for you. right? And in that day, declares the Lord, you will call me my husband, and no longer will you call me my Baal. The truest part of this statement is right here. In that day, that promised future, declares the Lord, you will. You will. It's coming. It's your future. And I'm going to fight for you, I'm going to discipline you, and I will allure you, but the end will always be the same for his people. God's passionate pursuit will forever be fulfilled for his people. You will call me my husband. Now, Edmund from The Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe, Chronicles of Narnia, I'm going to share this story because I can, and because, honestly, it's just so much fun to talk about. Edmund, what is his thing, right? Let's look at it over and over. Edmund is enticed by the witch. That looks good. The things you have, the things you can promise me, I want those things. And so he goes with the white witch. But actually, very quickly, roadblocks. Roadblocks get put up in front of him. He has an opportunity to even go back home. He's escaped it all. And yet he still goes and pursues it, right? All right, well, that didn't work. And so what happens? Well, he ends up in the dungeon of the White Witch. So now we're starting to see who the White Witch really is and start to see the life that with the White Witch, what's that really going to look like? And now he's starting to go, you know, this is not good. I've betrayed my family. I've made things worse. I am unforgivable at this point, unredeemable. This is where I may as well stay. But that's not where he stays, right? What happens? Eventually, it always ended up that Edmund would end up in the royal tent with Aslan. That's where it was always destined to go. That it was going to have Aslan was going to make room for him, Aslan being the representation of Christ in the story. It was just going to be the two of them. The brothers and sisters, they didn't get to go into the tent. They didn't get to hear what happened. And in there, they worked it out. And Aslan did not roar, bite his head off, yell at him, right? He spoke tenderly to him about his forgiveness and his love for him. And Edmund walks out of that tent humbled and in awe. What a good king! How did I never realize what a good king I have? And he tells his brothers and sisters, he says, I'm going to be a prince. He says I was destined to be a prince. That's who he made me to be. I am supposed to be this thing. But he's such a good king. But you know what happens next in the story, right? And it has to happen in the story. The very next thing that happens is Aslan has to go to the table and die. He has to be surrendered over to the White Witch to pay for the sins of Edmund, to pay for his sins, to make atonement for them. And there at the table, he is sacrificed and dies, right? God, all the things he promises, all the things that he's promising Israel, they're all good things and show what a faithful and good God that he is, that he's willing to forgive. But they only work if Christ goes to the cross. Directly after that, that is what happens, that Christ goes to the cross for us. It's only possible then. See, the misstep is that we are so focused on the legality of what is the allure. Will the allure work for me? What if I do this? Will your allure still work? Will I still turn back to you? And what's the maximum that I can do so that your allure is still effective? How does the allure work? Tell me about the allure. I'm very fascinated by this. Yes, all interesting. Is there limitations? Is there a line? What is it? Oh, you're missing it. You are so missing it. Because what you're missing is the tender voice of our Lord. We're so focused on the legality of all of it that we're missing that our God is speaking to us. And how is he speaking to us? Can you hear his love for you? This past week, Timothy Keller passed away. Passed away on Friday at 72. Timothy Keller and John Piper, their last conversation together, they were discussing Matthew 10. And talking about how the disciples came back to Jesus and the disciples said, oh, even the demons, they responded and obeyed our commands. It was amazing. And Jesus responded back to them, don't be happy about that. Don't get excited. You know what you should be excited about? That your name is written in heaven. John Piper has said that this is what Timothy Keller wants us to understand, is do not fall away from the love of your God. Fall in love with Him, not in the things about Him. Listen to His voice. So what we're going to do, Hosea chapter 2, I'm going to take a huge chunk of it that we haven't had a chance to talk about, but I just want you to close your eyes. Just close your eyes. Ignore the allure. Forget how it works. Don't try to understand grace and the complexity of like, how is God doing this thing? Just listen to Him. Listen to what He says to you. Close your eyes. I'm serious. Do it. Here we go. Will betroth you to me in righteousness and in justice, in steadfast love and in mercy. I will betroth you to me in faithfulness, and you shall know the Lord. And in that day I will answer, declares the Lord. I will answer the heavens, and I shall answer the earth, and the earth shall answer the grain and the wine and the oil, and they shall answer Jezreel, and I will sow her for myself in the land. I will have mercy on no mercy. And I will say, not my people, you are my people. And he shall say, you are my God.